What's happening, Super Troopers? What's happening? Peter Von Panda here. Hey, just sitting here Friday afternoon. I thought I'd come out and just rant. Why not rant? That's all I'm going to do. So just thought I'd kind of tell you whatever's on my mind. If you're around, Daniel Racing, hi, buddy. Thanks for joining me. Feel free to throw in some questions, but I want to rant about a couple of things here. First of all, I need a drink, and I was either thinking of trying or drinking my cannabis energy drink, which is delicious, or I was thinking of drinking Coca-Cola vanilla, which tastes like cream soda. What's happening, John Eli? What's happening, brother? And I'm gonna go with why wouldn't I say it right, Dan? Seems like it's pretty straightforward. Coke. What do you think I got? What do you think I chose? Oh, I went with the vanilla. Oh yeah, that's good. All right, man. So let's dive into it. Let's make this rant chock full of ranties. And first of all, I'm just going to move this over here so I can see everyone. And I'm going to talk to you about. First of all, let's talk about Super Troopers 2. I went and saw it last weekend on opening weekend. It's one of those I think you really want to be really, really drunk on. And was not nearly as funny as the first one. Not nearly as well thought out and cohesive, unfortunately, which is really sad. I think the Broken Lizard thing, I just saw the Dukes of Hazzard on like DirecTV or something, and I noticed all of the Super Trooper guys are in that movies too, so they must have been like made by the same company, but the Dukes of Hazzard was actually funnier than Super Troopers. So disappointing a little bit, but you know what, I still support those guys. Go ahead. I don't mind if they kickstart movie 3. That's how they did the second one, as much as far as I can tell. I think it was a $5 million movie. All right, so first of all, let's rant here. I want to pull this up first. Elio Motors. You know, I've ranted about Elio Motors before. I have not said that they're a scam explicitly. I just said because I don't know that was ever the intention. I think they really did want to come out with a 3-wheeler, this high efficiency 87 mile per gallon 3-wheeler. I had issues with whether the math would work on that, whether you could actually get 87 miles a gallon out of a 3-wheeler when motorcycles using more efficient engines and whatnot weren't getting that themselves, and all sorts of things. And I don't remember how many millions and millions of dollars they blew through. But one of the cardinal sins to me was that Paul Elio, well, I don't know that he's a bad guy or anything like that, and I think he's pretty genuine, was paying himself something like $250,000 salary on a startup. And I've started some businesses in the past. You just don't pay yourself that kind of thing, right? To me, I'm number 12. No idea? Yeah, baby. Number 12. You just don't do that. And the reason that you don't do that is because you're trying to breathe life into a business, right? You're trying to right, you get the value of that, you get the shareholder value of that later, but you've got to create that value before you can pay yourself. I just think that's kind of a cardinal sin, is that people who are starting businesses for cash flow are kind of already working against themselves, because businesses just don't traditionally do that. And so you've got to kind of be a entrepreneur and suck it up and do what you need to do and take your money on the back end. But that was always kind of a red flag to me. And then obviously I think they overpromised and underdelivered. They haven't built a car, so they've clearly underdelivered. But it's the price of the car keeps going up, even on their website. The production date keeps being, we hope. And here's the big shocker, is that they have given up on releasing shares on, I think they were trying to do it on the NASDAQ. And the issue here is that they have announced a couple things. One, they have like this Elio coin. They're getting into cryptocurrencies, trying to raise some money on that. And then 2, also in good news, they raised $2 million from the founder of Overstock. Now, I don't mind that guy. I bought from Overstock too, but Overstock is starting to quickly become, or it maybe is, one of the most irrelevant e-commerce sites on the web at this point. And it's a little bit funny to me that someone would plow in $2 million. And the big reason that it's funny to me is because, one, I'm not exactly sure what $2 million is supposed to accomplish, because that is certainly not enough to start production on cars. The last I heard from Elio's postings was that they needed somewhere between $200 and $300 million to get going. So I don't know that $2 million does anything except maybe pay some bills, maybe pay some back salaries. I feel a little bit like this is a government shutdown where people come back to work after not working and then kind of get back all their back pay. And so I think based on the cash flow I saw from Elio from last year, I wouldn't be surprised that they weren't paying Paul anything and anyone else, social media or anyone that is actually collecting a check or vendors. So I don't know that the $2 million does anything. And they were obviously sued, I think, by the parish of Louisiana for some back money on the lease on the factory facility. And I think they owed $500,000 and change on a penalty. So I think all the money is spoken for. So I'm not sure what's going on, except that it seems like a rich guy is trying to do a solid to his buddy. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's material enough to do anything to get a car on the road, and particularly since they're abandoning kind of the big critical funding piece. Either that means it's dead on arrival, or it means that the Department of Energy is going to give them this massive $1 billion loan to get started. And I kind of think it's more dead on arrival than massive starting. So that is kind of my quick rant on Elio Motors. I know that they have kind of like had people holding on by a thread, hoping. And I was hoping too. I thought, man, it'd be awesome to buy a brand new car for $6,700, have it super fuel efficient. I'm just commuting by myself most of the time, so it makes a lot of sense. And I was all for it back in 2014 or whatever. But now I'm calling it. I'm calling it dead. Who knows? They can prove me wrong, and honestly, at this point, I don't care. I unfollowed their Facebook page. I don't even care about updates, even if they try to. So anyway, there it is. That's my rant on Elio Motors. I know that I did my video on them a year ago, and kind of was saying like, oh, who knows let's see what'll happen, and they were going for trying to go public, but I'm calling it quits on that. So that yes, I'm calling it dead now. I am probably, it's probably like a doctor, JC, that's called out to like the forest to try to ID a body that's been discovered, and it's been decomposing for years, and he's like, I think it's dead. That's me. What happened? Jesse, you didn't miss anything, brother. You're coming in just at the right time. I just went on an Elio rant, but I want to go on a bigger rant. A bigger rant. Cadillac. I want to go on a rant of why maybe Cadillac's on an upswing. Maybe there's things to like about it now, but man, has Cadillac been arrogant and dumb. So first of all, as you might know, and I'm not going to get this dude's name right, Cadillac CEO Johan de Nischen has kind of made some news lately. And, one of the big claims to fame for him was that he had moved, and I want to say maybe 4 years ago, Cadillac's headquarters out of Detroit to Soho. Is that where in New York, I believe? I might be able to confirm that here. But the whole point, when at the time it was a little bit like sacrilege to say, hey, we're not going to do that. But, he was like, Cadillac is a brand of brands, and it's more cosmopolitan than a company that should be in Detroit. And, Cadillac is in a design studio out in California, I think in Irvine. And, a lot of companies do various things and put kind of like their artsy stuff, in various places. But, yeah, so shortly after he started, Cadillac signed the lease for new headquarters in Soho, the obnoxiously trendy Lower Manhattan neighborhood. And it was a big move, Detroit to New York. I mean, this article here, I'm looking at a Jalopnik article, moved a historic home in Detroit to New York City, and definitely ruffled more than a few feathers in the Motor City and in the auto industry's Midwestern heart. I mean, there's nothing magic about the Midwest in cars. I mean, I don't want to say that's a sacred cow that can't be slaughtered. Yeah, Cadillac is not the Cadillac. Lincoln is the Cadillac of cars. You like Cadillacs, Lee Arvid? Hey, how to test base. Yeah, you know what? I liked Cadillacs too. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you my personal story in that. I have owned a Cadillac, and as you guys may have seen in my recent videos, I sold a Cadillac last fall. I sold my Cadillac last fall. Loved it. Cadillac has been consistently at the bottom of initial quality, Scott. Yeah, you're right, brother. You're right. Initial quality. That's always a funny one too. Quality in the first 30 or 60 days. Like if you can't show initial quality, That's just terrible. That is just terrible. That award always kind of confused me. It's like a lot of other things where I'm always like, you know, I get certified pre-owned. I know what that means, but it's kind of like the comedians that say certified pre-owned. What does that mean? It means like I had a mechanic look over the car and they're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this car has been driven before. All signs point to that it has been driven, and I will certify that someone has driven this car before. It has been pre-owned. So I get it. No, but the initial quality award to me is worthless. I mean, and I think the fact that if some people do bad in that, some automakers are doing bad in that, like you said in Cadillac, that is just horrible. You can't get the first 30 days of car ownership to be pretty rock solid for your customers. That is horrible. So anyway, Denician, and pardon me if I'm slaughtering his name, went to took the car brand to New York. You may recall that Cadillac changed their branding. I think around this time, their ads all changed too. Some of them were like fashion shows. They didn't even show the car. They just kind of showed the car like morphing out of liquid metal at the end. There was a commercial where the Cadillac was driving through the streets in New York, and people were walking backwards, and it just kind of showed the outside and then a little quick inside, and it was like, whatever. And I'm going to get to some specifics here, is that Cadillacs don't do it for me anymore. And let me back up a little bit. I sold my 06 Cadillac CTS. Love that car. It was the 3.4 liter V6. It was the V6 version. And it was pretty well tricked out. What an awesome car. Now, I will say for that year, 2006, it did not stack up to other 2006 brands like BMW. Most notably, the BMW 3 Series. Was it better? You can get in a BMW 3 Series of that vintage right now with the E36, or is it the 46 models? 46, I guess. Today, and the plastic, the dash is nice. It's kind of a matte, a nice kind of elephant skin texture to it. It still looks good. Everything feels good. Nothing seems, while it may seem a little dated, it doesn't seem like bad. You get into that 2006 Cadillac CTS, and it is hard plastics. Now, listen, in my review of it, I think I did a review on my CTS. I kind of forgave that because that car, that CTS model, was really a breakthrough model for Cadillac in a lot of ways. Remember, prior to that model, it was the Cadillac Catera, which was just an opal lift, and it didn't look great. I guess it wasn't bad. It just looked like a Chrysler Sebring. It was not a particularly good car, but I get they were trying to bring a whole new car, birth this whole new car, using that art and science design language. And I think the art and science design language looked good. I think they had the wheels and the wheelbase in the right position. They kind of pushed the wheels out to the corners, had a nice kind of slab-sided, kind of bulky, geometric shape to it, kind of a stealth fighter shape. I think that was part of the influence, and I thought it worked. And I thought they did a really nice job. One of the things on that CTS is that the headlights were very vertical. That was a really big change. I remember, most cars have these really, squinted eye look headlights to them, and Cadillac kind of slaughtered that sacred cow, went with something different, went with this much more vertical look, and I thought it was great. I thought it was great, and I thought that design language worked well on the other models. So if you remember, the Cadillac SRX that came out later, slightly after that, had almost kind of a very similar front face, but to me it had too much station wagon like back end. That's kind of what hurt it, But I thought that was a pretty good looking car. And then the car I really, really liked, the car I loved, and I thought, crushed it using the same language, was the XLR, right? So it was the Cadillac SL 500, Mercedes 500 competitor. It was their big sedan. It was a V8, the Northstar engine. It was based on the Corvette C5 chassis at the time. It had the same kind of door actuators, the solenoids on them or whatever. And, the underpinnings were basically the same. I don't know why they used a different engine than the Corvette motor. How do you beat the current gen CTS-V though? How do you beat it? Lee, we'll talk about that. I'm going to get up to that because I went to the auto show this last year, and I wanted to kind of go through the history here and get all the way to the beginning. So it's a good question, and it's a fair question. I would love, man. We should do a little Google chat or something sometime, right? Maybe have some of you guys. I guess you can keep doing them in the top chats here, but man, I'd love to get some of your thoughts on it. So feel free to keep messaging me, guys. I'm chatting here. I'm watching it. I'm open-minded. Convince me otherwise on my rants. So I thought that language worked for Cadillac. It really worked well. I thought the interior materials continue to get a little better, especially on the XLR, the sedan retractable hardtop. I thought it was great. I thought the car suffered a little bit on thinness, and what I mean by that is it got a little thin through the middle, and then the front lower front fascia kind of pointed up a little too much. It didn't have more of that ground hugging look that it really needed. And the Cadillac or the generation of Corvette did a much better job on that, and the Mercedes SLs also did a better job of kind of being a little lower to the ground and kind of filling in that space. Now, Chip Foose, I don't know if you'll recall this, but he was hired by a Cadillac dealership, I think, to kind of customize a couple of SRXs and XLRs, and he kind of rolled some additional sheet metal to kind of make a much bigger rocker panel to kind of really drop the side of the car down, and that kind of bulked it up. I actually thought those looked great. That is how it should have come from the factory, and really all they needed to do was make a bigger rocker and kind of a new front fascia and a new rear fascia, but still I think the car looks great, and I actually think they still look pretty good now, and those cars can be had for anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 right now, under 100,000 miles, in the 50 to 70,000 mile range. So if you're looking for what I still think is a great looking car, now I will tell you that the problem with the XLR and the SRX was the same as the CTS, is that interior quality of materials, interior, was kind of crappy. It was kind of a crap box. And on the XLR wasn't as bad. They kind of upgraded some of the areas that they really needed to. But the thing that really drove me absolutely batty is on the instrument cluster. They went to like Bulgari, famed watchmaker, and they have like these Bulgari bezels around the gauges, but they're in that crappy plastic. What were they thinking? Like, what was the point? Just make them look better. Don't put another brand name on your crappy standard bezels. Like, there is no way Bulgari was like, what about the matte gray plastic you use in like the 95 GMC Jimmy? What about that? How about that for, you remember the Pontiac Bonnevilles? Why don't we just use those gauges? I mean, that was horrible. I get that they were trying to do something like cool and high end, but then why didn't you take those bezels out and at least like also chrome them or paint them? I don't even care, but do something to make it look something better than crap like unfinished plastic. And I'm gonna guess actually that they didn't do that. I bet they're probably yeah, right, absolutely, pre-bankrupt GM. There's a reason GM went bankrupt, man. There's a reason. They probably were finished. They were probably crappier plastic underneath, and in the what I actually see is the finish on it. But that was an issue for me. Still, I like the car. I like it. I wish they had put the Corvette motor into it, one for power and everything else. But then that Cadillac motor has some weird quirks about it, and reliability issues. Anyway, so my whole rant on this is that art and science breakthrough. I love those things because you are birthing a new kind of a new platform, a new car, et cetera, right? It can't be an BMW M3 coming right out of the gate. What you want to do is you want to prove that concept. You want to prove that, hey, this is where we're going and it makes sense. And then what happens in the next couple iterations of that car is then you start layering on the quality. It's a little bit like what Cadillac did with Escalade. They just took a Tahoe, they just rebadged it. They didn't do anything else. They couldn't really do anything else. They, just put like little Cadillac emblems and said, will people buy it? And they kind of proved that concept. Then when they kind of proved the concept, then they were able to go in the next version and really kind of amp it up, right? You can kind of make the business case for it, but what you don't do is you don't go whole hog on it, release the car with all of the trappings that you want, and just hope that the market takes it, right? So I kind of forgive them on that. The problem to me was the CTS that followed that generation of CTS was not an upgrade. I get that on when you were checking the boxes, should it be bigger? Should it be longer? Should there be more chrome? Should the interior be wrapped in leather and Alcantara and all this stuff? And they were ticking boxes. Should the navigation display retract partially into the dashboard? Check. Yes, this is all the things that the European cars have. This is totally European. We'll do that. And the car to me looked bloated, right? I didn't think they looked good at the time they came out. I remember when they came out, I watched a Jay Leno garage video, and he was like, this looks good. I don't remember what he said, but it was like totally... you could tell he was not convinced, but he's like, you could put this on, as a competitor to, any of the Germans or whatever. But he wasn't like ecstatic. And I was too. I was like, the front end looks a little bloated. It looks a little droopy. It looks a little like melted. And, it just got too round and too fat. And that, to me, it was like the CTS was kind of like a scalpel. It was really sharp. It was like trim, and yet it was kind of like the to me the design was kind of sucked around a muscular frame. But the following CTS was just fat and bloated, just big general waterfall grill. I feel like General Motors studios at the time were like, oh yeah, waterfall grill. That's sporty. And you know what? We'll just use the one out of the Chevy Cruze, and let's wrap it in leather. Right, and stitch it. That's what high end car companies do, right? They didn't think anything of like like buttons are just kind of designed and then kind of like shaped as a triangle to fit in like this corner. There was like no intention behind it. And I'll be honest. Fast forward from then to now, I have had no desire for that CTS right after the one I had, and I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm old. But like even the ATS when it came out, and I was like, oh, that's cool. A little smaller, maybe a little more like A4-ish or something like that. It was a BMW competitor. It's not. So I was in Michigan. A buddy had an ATS on a lease because they apparently cannot give ATSs away. So he had this redonkulously cheap lease as a GM employee on an ATS, and that car sucked. You know what? I'll be honest. Like, I'm not trying to say like if you drive a car, if you drive a Cruze, it's I'm not trying to be a snob about it. But I will tell you what, I would rather drive a tricked out Cruze than the ATS. First of all, it's small, but then secondly, I used to say Cadillacs are warmed over Chevys. I'm not even saying that anymore. They're not even like really warmed over. I went to the auto show and I was looking at the Cadillacs. Especially when you walk from Mercedes to Audi, and then over to Cadillac, because they try to put all, they're like, there's a luxury car section. It was almost infuriating. I was with a couple of family members and stuff like that, and the consensus was, we didn't put in this words, but we were all like, the current Cadillac is dead. Like, and here's how I'll put it: you get into an ATS or even a CTS, even the current ones to me, and you get in and it feels GM. I don't care if they do those commercial focus groups or something. You cover up that logo and you're like, this is GM. Yeah, it's got an Italian leather stitch on this edge or whatever. But that's all like GM's creativity is it's just taking like the interior we've made, which now like the Cruze has pretty nice texture on the plastic, and so it looks pretty good. It feels decent, and then they're like, yeah, let's cover it with leather. It's like not particularly an improvement. It's just different. And it's just like, it doesn't disguise anything. The difference is you go over to Mercedes or GM or even the Genesis. I mean, that's the one that kind of stunned me a little bit. And people are kind of rethinking the interior, especially like kind of the stacked interior, where your hand does not naturally follow a waterfall. I know everyone wanted to think that the Acura NSX had this really dramatic, like very steep waterfall, Porsche Carrera GT, but your hand kind of, when it's out there, I should be doing like this. I look like I'm doing something airy in here. But when your hand is kind of like this, it's kind of more falling vertically, right? It's not being drawn all the way back to like your hip. And so the stacked arrangement of dashboards it makes more and more sense. I remember when I first saw it in the BMW 7 Series, under the Chris Bangle designer, and I didn't really like it, but like when I got into one and tried it, I was like, man, that makes a whole lot of sense. And then Mercedes kind of took it on, and Hyundai Genesis took it on, and Audi's and Lexus in a huge way too has kind of taken on this very stacked look and kind of kept controls one on top of each other, and those are all really nicely placed by the hand. But yet GM is still holding on to this waterfall thing because it's like cockpit-like or something, but it's not really that ergonomic, and it really kind of prevents you from having a lot of the things that you want, like more space down on the center console, or being able to put a drink like this Coca-Cola Zero Sugar Vanilla, because you're kind of losing the space. And then sometimes they have a gap between the center console and the dashboard, and so you can actually put things under there too. But I get in it, and they just like warmed over Chevys are that's kind of generous, because the Chevys are, and the part of the problem is the Chevys are pretty nice. The quality materials are pretty nice, and the Cadillacs just feel like Chevys, right? And so my point is, you want to go over to Cadillac or Audi, go over to Mercedes, get in some of those cars, and they just feel a lot more quality, right? There's more intention in the design. There's a lot of more nuance, even where like different materials meet up, like the plastic meets wood trim or aluminum trim or whatever it is. They just have really nice crisp edges. They're cut really nice. Cadillac and GM tend to round things out when they're kind of meeting things, and so you got these big kind of rounded edges, and it just doesn't. It looks like it's more to be forgiving in production. Still use that waterfall design. I think they have the best interiors in this. Lee Arvid, is that how you go by it, brother? I will tell you what. At the last auto show, the Mercedes interiors are not only the best in the business, but they are head and shoulders the best in the business. And here's where I'm kind of getting to. The problem to me, and why I'm kind of calling Cadillac dead, is that you look at those Cadillacs, you look at the Mercedes, and the Mercedes are not, they're not even in the same ballpark, right? So here's, I'm looking at the camera here. Let me put Chevy interiors here. I think they're pretty good. The quality materials and the sound deadening is pretty good. Cadillacs are like here to me, but Mercedes are like here. You get into the Mercedes and just the finish, even the kind of that blasted metal, that flat metal finish on like the rotary air vents and things like that, the switch gear, the speaker covers, which are now in like the Lincolns as well, where they do kind of that swirl pattern of the holes. It's just so nicely thought out. They look good. They're small nuanced changes, but there's so much intention behind it. It's just totally separates it from Cadillac. But here's where one, you could just say, well, it's a different kind of car and it's a different price point. And they are at different price points. I agree. I even think Mercedes are head and shoulders above BMW. Yeah, I would agree with that too. I'd agree with that too. In fact, I think BMW had some great interiors, and they totally stopped. They, for like the last 6 or 7 years, they haven't like improved interiors at all. And here's the issue: is like when I look at the next car, like the Cadillac or the Mercedes A-Class, this A-Class interior where they have like an LED light inside of the air vent, so it kind of creates like a this like soft lighting illumination inside the air vent. That is just crazy. I'll say to me the Audis are pretty close, Scott. To me here, if I look at the Mercedes CLA, the Audi A3 is probably just a smidge kind of less buttoned up to me, right? Still way ahead of Cadillac. But I will say the Audi A3 over the CLA there's a pretty big price difference. And here I'm kind of getting distracted on my point here. But the biggest point to me is that, I look at the Mercedes, it's better, it feels more high quality. It just looks like it has more intention in the design, more details, the whole 9 yards. And then when you look at the price of a Mercedes versus an ATS, so I was looking at one of this Mercedes CLA, and I can't remember what edition it was called, but it was an edition, and it was like $37,000. I think was like the window sticker. Okay, $37,000, and I was like, that's pretty fair. So what I did is I went over to, and then I thought about that, and I was like, it's pricey. To me, I'm a poor dude. It's pretty pricey. And then we're through Audi, and we go over to Cadillac, and I'm looking, and I'm thinking, looking at the ATS sedan, and I'm like, this is equivalent. It's not nearly as nice. It's like I said, I'm quite a bit. And I look at the price, and the Cadillac ATS sedan was $45,000. $45,000. So my issue is that the Mercedes was like $7,000 less, and it was better. So if you had just told me that the Mercedes was 45 and the Cadillac was 38, I would have been like, okay, that kind of makes some sense. I can understand why maybe they're kind of balances out the sales numbers. The trade-offs make sense, but the Mercedes was better and cheaper, right? And cheaper, and that was like crazy to me. And maybe you think, oh, the ATS was bigger. I'll tell you what, I got in the backseat of that ATS. Holy smokes. The CLA is not a big car, but that the ATS is not a big car either. So this is, to me, it's like, I'm not sure. Like, I don't think CLAs are loss leaders for Mercedes. I don't know that they're making any money per se on them. They're probably more of a gateway car to get a new demographic, younger demographic, maybe a millennial demographic into those cars. But I would buy it. And I would not buy an ATS. I can just tell you that. And so that kind of brings me fast forward all the way to the Rant here, where Cadillac under Nissan was obsessed about this image. He may have seeing that he called out a bunch of things, and and I wasn't particularly familiar with him, but I remember seeing this article, and I'll tell you when I pulled it up here. It was back in it was this year, I think. It was maybe right after the auto show or something like this. But he called out Apple CarPlay. Says, yeah, people were asking, why isn't it Apple CarPlay in Cadillacs? I mean, they're in a lot of the Chevys and stuff like that. And he just kind of he called them out. I mean, he said this. Oh, yeah, it can bring a lot of functionality in the car, but I will also tell you it is extremely clunky. What? I mean, it's like this guy is a space cadet. Here's the other issue, is that in the Cadillacs I've been in, there has never been a clunkier head unit than the Cadillac Q. It is, to me, hands down, the worst car interface on the market today. And I've tried a bunch of them. And you've seen, I've rented cars here. I have rented crappy, throwaway disposable rental cars and trucks. And I will tell you what, those head units and the functionality there are easier to use, more effective, more useful than Cadillac Q. Now, the Cadillac Qs that may be coming out this year I think the speeds are improved. But, it's like, when I was looking at, when someone was like, oh, it's like a tablet. You pinch to zoom. It was nothing like that. I pinched to zoom, went away, took a dump, came back, and then it would kind of stutter step out zoom or something. It was terrible. I mean, it was almost worthless. And it's one of those things where I am not a big fan of replacing head units anymore, because they're so integrated in the car and the controls on the steering wheel and all that stuff. But Cadillac Q is one of those where I probably wouldn't buy a Cadillac because of how bad that head unit is. Apple CarPlay is actually a deal breaker. I'm actually looking to buy an SUV right now and took all the non-CarPlay, took off all the non-CarPlay Android Auto compatible cars from the list. So hey JC, so you're saying you have to have Apple CarPlay in your next car, is that right? I think the chat's a little on a delay, so let me know if you're saying that. But if that's what you're saying, I agree too. As you know, in my Fiat, I don't have a head unit per se, but I will tell you what, when I went out to Colorado and we rented I think it was a Tahoe or a Suburban or something, it had Apple CarPlay. Yes, JC, you're correct. And that sold me. I didn't have to pair my phone. It was a rental car, so I didn't want to go through that problem. You just plugged in your phone, you play your own music, you navigate to an address that's on your calendar, and it comes up on the head unit. It is the best. It is the best out there. Now, I don't have an Android device, so I'm sure Android Auto is equally as good. The point here is that the functionality on your phone is so good. This is all automakers should be supporting. This is all put a radio in there or something like that, but I never want to buy a car with standard built-in navigation again, right? This is the only device I want to go off of. And I'll tell you what, we were driving, I was with some buddies, and a text came in, and I said, read the text or whatever and respond to the text. And you're just speaking this stuff into the microphone, and the CarPlay was awesome. So for Denishan to say, it's a little clunky, representing the clunkiest, worst head unit system in the world is the epitome of being disconnected, the epitome of a lack of awareness, right? Not even to say like, listen, your cars are a little old, they're long as tooth, the interiors are not living up to it. It just kills me. And then I see this article. They improved the Q system in the XT4 and CT6, moved to a BMW style rotor now. Yeah, fantastic. I love it, Leo. I've heard that. I've heard like the speed is improved too and whatnot. To me, though, the issue is, why did they need to do that when, cell phone makers like Google and Apple were making the ability? Just put in a standard, like it could, I rented a Chevy Spark. Yeah, Chevy Spark, and it had the CarPlay, because it doesn't come with like a car stereo and all this other stuff. So you just plug in your phone. Worked great. That's the only thing I want in cars, to be honest, anymore. So if they sold a Cadillac with the same thing that comes in the Chevy Spark, despite how low end you might think that is, I would buy it. But I would not buy with one of the Q, the Q features that I've used in the past. In fact, I'd be more inclined to buy a Cadillac XLR, which had one of those large, crappy navigation devices that was also my CTS, and replace that with like just my own double DIN Apple CarPlay aftermarket stereo, because it's just, I think you risk a lot in doing it in brand new cars that don't have it. So so that's where I want to be, or that's what I wanted to say. But I also wanted to kind of throw out here that, Denishan basically ranted about a lot of other things, kind of blamed his demise because he was recently ousted on all sorts of things here. And it was just like, I don't know what was. My car Infiniti audio is so advanced that I plug a headphone jack into my phone to play the cassette. I love it. You know what? The Infiniti audio system is pretty awesome. I've got one in my Prowler. You know what's so funny is I don't know if Infiniti was kind of really in bed with Chrysler or something, but the Infiniti audio system, which was in a lot of Chryslers, kind of in the 90s, early 2000s, or late 90s. I loved it, man. I was like, man, this is so awesome. And that was kind of the rise of having like these other branded systems in cars. But man, there was a big difference in cars that just had the stereo, the Chrysler head unit versus the Infiniti. And I loved it. And I don't know, it just made me feel super sweet. But he's so he goes on his own rants, talking about how Cadillac it's a brand, it's not a car. Here's his quote, right, from a Fortune article in 2014. We want to be a global luxury brand that happens to sell cars. We don't want to be an automotive brand. There's nothing that exciting about an ad with a car in it by itself. We need to start injecting more humanity into our brand and into our advertising. And then his marketing millennial guru, and I can't remember what her name, Melody Lee, I'm sure is a fine person, proclaimed to be, she continued here. I don't buy products, I buy brands. I don't use Apple computers because of the best computers. I use them because Apple is cool. We need to show drivers what the Cadillac lifestyle is all about. First of all, that is not why you buy. That is such an oversimplification of what brand is. Brand starts with the product, right? You become a fan of something because of the product, because of a person, and because of what it represents in the lifestyle. But you cannot build that, by saying it. It is, for example, let's say cannabis energy drink. Maybe I like the cannabis lifestyle or something like this. But why Monster got popular was because extreme guys were, extreme athletes, BMX bikers and and car jumpers, whatever, and wingsuiters and all. We're all drinking Monster, and it was and Monster was exciting not because the product wasn't bad, or so let me say this: the product has to be good in and of itself, right? But then what you do is you associate it to your lifestyle. So I do get that, but the product has to be good on top of that. It has to actually do what you want, right? It wouldn't make sense for someone like Shaun White. I don't know if he was a Monster drinker or something like that, but let me use this example. If he was like pitching Earl Grey tea, because one, I want to aspire to be like him, but I also want what I need, and it has to be the best product for what I need, right? And having an energy drink to get through a long day or whatever might be right, but it's probably not Earl Grey tea, and so that doesn't make any sense. To me, you use Apple computers because, one, they made an outstanding computer, but what made them cool was Steve Jobs. What made them cool was that you had a dictator billionaire demanding a computer to be made the way it was. And that said, not only do I want to be like Steve Jobs, do I like his ethos? Do I like the way he handles himself? Do I like his lifestyle? Do I want to be that kind of guy in the tech world, blah, 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 blah. And does he make an ass-kicking computer? Yes. So now I will buy it. It is now an aspirational product to me, right? So my issue with this is that Cadillac is not firing on any of those cylinders, right? And so I get maybe they were trying to do that, but you can't just say like, we're going to work on the brand. Work on the car. Make the car something that fits a particular need. Make it the best at something, and then figure out who is going to obviously pitch that for you. Your pitch man, your celebrity endorser or whoever, and say, okay, so here's the lifestyle that you're living, and here's the best thing for it, the best car for it, a premium product better than anything else, and that will make me a fan, right? But until then, it's just a commodity, right? And that's all that Cadillac has ever been to me at this point, is a commodity. I don't look at them and look at their design. And the funny thing is, what's this new Cadillac? It's not they got a lot of press last year at the auto show. It's kind of got this like sharp edge around, but it looks around the grill, but it looks like an Audi to me. And everyone's like, wow, this could really light Cadillac on fire. I didn't think it was particularly amazing. I didn't think it was bad. But to me, it's like, again, it's just kind of style and it looks decent. And maybe they do a nice execution on it. But what is the point of it, right? How does that, if Cadillac wants to be a lifestyle brand, not a car brand, then what is the point of it in my lifestyle? And if you can't do that, then just make the best damn car you can and then sell me on that, right? Cadillac wants to be like Chanel's brand that happens to sell watches. Yeah, that's true. Right. Yeah, I'd agree with that. This reminds me of how Rolls-Royce claims they don't have any other competitors in the car industry. You're kind of right. I mean, Lee, it's interesting. Rolls-Royce claims that, and I would say that they kind of don't, but obviously that space is getting busier and busier. Bentley has always kind of been in that space a little bit. But the funny thing with all of the high-end brands, whether it's Mercedes and the Maybach and BMW with their individual series, and everyone's kind of trying to go for this, the stratosphere on all these prices. The funny thing is I was at a presentation and a guy was talking about Bentley, and how Bentley, just the Bentayga, is that the SUV, was talking about the business case for the Bentayga was that people couldn't spend more than $200,000 on a SUV. It wasn't really because of the best SUV or whatever, and obviously they're going to make a very quality piece at that price. But what the funny thing is that people just want to spend more money, right? Very rich people, and there are just some SUVs that don't get higher. You can get a really nice Range Rover for $140,000, right? But if you go to Range Rover and you're like, what do you have for $300,000? They'd be like, I don't know. We don't do anything like that. So the funny thing is they're all kind of climbing, and Rolls-Royce kind of was always in that space, kind of the stratospheric prices. But that space is going to start getting crowded out. I'm actually a little surprised that top luxury cars, Doug DeMuro just did a video on the high-end Lexus LS, right? The extended wheelbase one. I'm not sure why everyone's doing it in cars. I actually see Ford just announced that they are kind of killing basically all their car brands or their car models, aside from, primarily the Mustang. That makes sense to me. I know it seems like kind of a harsh choice, but cars don't make a lot of money and people aren't buying them, right? I mean, to be honest, I have my Fiat 500. It is a great commuter car. But if I buy another car, it would probably be slightly bigger, right? Because I want to be able to get 4 people around in comfort. I wouldn't mind continuing to sit up a little more upright. Doesn't mean it has to be a truck or a CUV or SUV, but it would probably be a little bigger, right? And so, it's just, I think, just kind of the nature of it. And it's not like I'm trying to not be sporty in my decision or whatever. And I don't know what I will eventually get. Maybe it'll probably be decided over the next year. But the fact that the big luxury brands are still making cars is kind of confusing. Now, I know that's changing with the Mercedes just unveiled kind of a super high-end sedan SUV type of thing, and their Range Rover and the Bentley and Lamborghini and all these other companies coming out with SUVs. That space is getting crowded. But I just wanted to go on to rant about Cadillac, because here's where I'm going to give Denishan some credit. I don't know how long he was the CEO of Cadillac. This article that I was looking at here, I know has him speaking very aggressively in 2014. That's only 4 years ago. You cannot turn around car design and car development and production instantaneously. These things take a little while. But, to me, it's like I look at some of the pictures of the current Cadillacs, and if you didn't see the Cadillac logo, I mean, what would you think it'd be? I mean, it could be any GM. I mean, to me, because part of that is GMs are just a better quality, but you can't just take the same dashboard design and now wrap the top portion in leather and wrap the bottom portion in a little Alcantara and call it like a premium car. I mean, that just doesn't fly anymore. You've got to really think it out. And here's where, who said it? I hate that crossover move by Ford. I'm a younger guy and want a car. Well, I feel like crossovers are for moms or people with kids. Yeah, no, I'm hearing what you're saying, Lee. I like cars. I like, being able to take a turn without worrying about rolling over, all sorts of stuff like that. I've always kind of liked cars. If you take some of these personality tests, I don't know if you ever do, but some of them will match up personalities with cars. And I just have a personality where I like cars. I do like some trucks and things like that too. I'm not like a big luxury sedan kind of thing. I remember being in a room with some buddies of mine one time. We took this test, and they told you what kind of car that you should be driving. don't knock people with kids. Minivans rule. Hey, minivans rule and boys rule. And the funny thing is we took the test and then it kind of told us what kind of car we had. And we all looked at each other because we knew that every one of us drove exactly the car that it had on that survey. And we're a little stunned. It was a little kind of like eerie as like a Ouija board moment, but it was just funny because, I guess part of it is maybe when you get to an age where you're starting to buy cars that you want. When I was younger, I bought cars that I could afford, right? I'd look and be like, I got to buy a $1,200 car. What can I get for that? So, if I was driving my buddy's, Hyundai Onata, because the S was missing off of it. So it was a Hyundai Onata, or he had a Hyundai Excel for a while, or a Chevy Cavalier or whatever. I mean, those were cars bought based on budget. But when you can start buying cars that you like, that your personality is going to be reflected in, then you take one of these personality tests and you realize how predictable you are. It's kind of funny. Now, here's my thing is that I do think, and I don't know where the comment is, Lincoln is the Cadillac of cars right now. I am trying to think here. Where's the Lincoln Navigator website? So I checked out the Lincoln Continental at the auto show and the Lincoln Navigator, right? That's a big one. And I wish I could have seen, I think it was at the New York Auto Show where they unveiled the Lincoln Aviator, which is a brand or a name that hasn't been around for a little while. And let me tell you this about Lincoln. Holy crap. Their stuff is awesome. Their stuff is awesome. And I'm going to go on a little rant about this and kind of toot their horn. Probably the only thing I don't like about the Link is the wheel design, kind of these turbine fan things. I really hope they have a good selection on those because, they're not ugly to me, but they're just way too busy for my eye. Priority used to be design, engineer, cost accounts, now reversed. Yeah, I agree. I've heard they're really killing it off the Continental. They're already killing off the Continental. Yeah, to be honest, Lee, I don't know why they came out with the Continental. I guess I kind of get it. It was kind of a historic car. It's kind of a heritage car for them, but cars aren't selling. And if I'm going to drop, I'm going to try to look it up here. Lincoln Continental cost, because I don't know what the cost is on it. $45,000. Okay, so the Lincoln Continental is $45,000. If I were going to spend $45,000 on a vehicle, it would not be on a luxury car. I like the Continental. I think it was amazing. The back seat was amazing in it. It was an awesome car. And to me, the Lincoln Continental should be what the current Chrysler 300 is to me, right? The Chrysler 300, when they came out this latest generation, they've kind of facelifted it. They haven't really done much, and it still looks like a Chrysler, and it's just not. I don't understand. Especially when the Chrysler 300. Let me see, Chrysler 300, 2018. What are they going for? Chrysler 300s. I know there's a V6 and a Hemi model. It looks like they start at 28. I assume the limited goes for a 37.5. So okay, the Continental is $7,000 more potentially. I think that's what I said, right? $7,000. Did I say 45? Anyway, whatever. So the Continental is more expensive, but it is head and shoulders above the Chrysler. I like the 300, but just has not been evolving. And if the next version of the 300 isn't as good as the Continental, I'll just be flabbergasted. The interior of the Continental is so good. I can't stress that enough. I mean, and the thing is the intention in design. They didn't try Jersey almost the Continental best 5 front cover. That's where I always rode, Scott. Jeep and Ram is what's keeping FC alive. Yep, I totally agree with that. So the Continental interior is just so well thought out, right? It's like, to me, when you look at the Chrysler 300 interior, and I get that it's a little older, they kind of were like, someone sketched on the interior design. They're like, let's have like kind of this, head unit area here. And then they had like a head unit and they were like, okay, here's the screen size, but we'll fill in this with like a black plastic border. That literally, I am sure that's what happened because there's no intention on it. What Lincoln did was, how big is the screen? Now let's just make the border fit that, and then we'll put leather on the outside, and we will perforate the speaker covers to kind of match that. I mean, it was all intentional. It was like all thought out, as opposed to someone kind of sketching something like, let's try to make it fit that. And that's the difference to me. So there's all this dead wasted space in the Chrysler 300 and the Dodge Charger on the dashboards, and swaths of big plastic to fill in spaces. It doesn't look ugly. It's just when you get in something like the Lincoln Continental and thereby now the Lincoln Navigator and the Aviator, I'm sure, which I haven't seen in person, you just realize how intentional it is, how much detail, and it's at a level of execution like Mercedes, like Audi, right? I will even put them above BMW. I just thought it's great. The amount of chrome is nicely done. It's not overdone. The piano black touches are nicely done. They're not overdone. It's just, it looks all intentional and it feels like a nice place. And the seats in particular are really great. And the controls in the back are great. Now, the problem is nobody's buying cars and no one's buying really expensive cars. And I'm not trying to say that's good or bad. I'm just saying, even as myself, I'm not into the big expensive car. If I'm going to buy a car, I'd buy a Cayman or something, right? I mean, I'd buy a fun car, right? Not just something with a lot of trappings. If I were going to buy something really for comfort, I'd want to sit up high, have more space, have a nice commanding view. That would be the Lincoln Navigator or the Lincoln Aviator. I'm assuming the Lincoln Aviator will probably be a similar price, I don't know, as the Lincoln Continental. I'm not sure if we can find a ballpark price here for it. It's maybe too new. But I would put, if it is, I would put the Lincoln Aviator as kind of the truck version or the crossover version of the Continental. And so I think the Aviator will be a smashing success because it looks fantastic. It has all the same interior beauty of the Continental, but it's just not like this kind of small, weird size, which cars are, to be honest. Anyway, that's it. Man, that was a long time. What else we got here? Any other thoughts, huh? Just us ripping on people with minivans, right? So, anyway, I should finish on my point about Denishin. I don't know how many years he was CEO of Cadillac. Again, it takes a while. I get that. But, don't blow smoke up the back door by saying that you're a brand, that you're a lifestyle until you have the cars to back it up. Is my thing, right? I get what you should do is you should try to take your cars and kind of figure out the story with them and do the best you can with them at the time. But don't tell me something that a story, an experience, an image that is beyond your product line at that point, right? You can continue to get there, tell me where you're taking me, but don't tell me you are a Soho brand when how many people in Soho drive Cadillacs, right? I would expect to see Mercedes and Audis and Porsches and things like that. You prove it to me. Prove it to me. Don't tell me. Don't preach to me in these articles about what you are and you're a brand of brands and you just happen to sell cars. I mean that's different, right? That's a different thing. I feel like nobody buys Lincolns in general. They still have that old guy image. I will say. So Lee, you bring up a good point. I assume the Aviators will compete with the Audi Q7 around 55 to 75K. I'm going to, first of all, let me address you, JC, quickly here. I agree with you. I think the Aviator will probably compete in that brand. And I would say it's worth 55 plus all day long. If it's anything like a shrunken down Navigator, it'll be like that all day long. The only issue is I wonder if it'll encroach on 75 because the Navigator, I think, is a 75,000 or it's a $72,000 truck. So I kind of don't think that the Aviator will kind of get that high. I'm kind of thinking like 50. I maybe 50 to 65. But maybe there's some overlap there. Now, Lee, I think you make an interesting point. I feel like nobody buys Lincolns in general. They still have that old guy image. Yes. All right. So this is what I'm talking about, and where I think Denishin and his marketing people have it wrong. And I'm slaughtering this. I'm definitely not eloquent on my feelings here. The issue is that your perception of what Lincolns are is correct, right? Whether or not that actually is the demographic, it's the perception that's important, right? And so for Lincoln, what Lincoln should not do is be like, no, it's not for old guys. It's for young people, young hip people that like cool cars. Don't tell me that. Make cars that attract young people, young successful yuppies or whatever, right? That will change the image. Right, but not telling me the image. See, that's what I feel like Cadillac was doing. Is they're saying, no, we're an East Coast brand, we're a luxury brand, a top tier brand. Don't tell me that. Make a car that I don't get into and think of as a warmed over Chevy, right? show it to me. And I will tell you what, there's two different tracks here. Denishan kept saying that, and I still yet to see. The CT6 was an okay car, but it's just a marginal evolution over the current Cadillacs to me. There was nothing revolutionary, changing gears about it. The Cadillac Continental or the Lincoln Continental. Oh my gosh, what a Freudian slip. The Lincoln Continental, the Lincoln Navigator, and I am going to project and assume the Aviator, because like I said, the pictures of the exterior and interior do it for me on the Aviator. I mean, they just have a little more muscular shape. The Lincoln Navigator has a little bit of like Range Rover kind of blockiness to it, which is great. I think in that size, in that style and size, it works perfectly. But the Aviator has a little more curves. Man, God, it looks great. I haven't seen it in person, but it looks amazing. So the issue to me is like Lincoln isn't saying, hey, yeah, we're for young people. I think they're going to prove that they're moving down that demographic, right? The price points on the Lincolns might be a little hard to help move down that demographic age ladder a little bit. But I think they are an aspirational product for people in their 30s and 40s to say, hey, I want to have that, or younger in their 20s, right? The yuppie category. And I think people would, a 30-year-old would be seen driving an Aviator. Right. I think that is possible. But what they wouldn't be seen is driving the Cadillac SRX, which looks like, I don't know, Ford Edge to me. I mean, it doesn't look better than the Chevy Equinox. It's different and it has little flourishes, but it looks like a warmed over Chevy. Right. And it doesn't have kind of presence. It just kind of looks like a bubble with Cadillac trim on it to me. And so there's nothing about that is attractive, but the Aviator does. Right. And so, again, that's to me, it's Lincoln not telling me what who they want to be attracted to. They're just making themselves attractive to it. Cadillac just never delivered on that. They're really struggling. I'm not sure why. And I'm not sure if the new Lincolns have been in development longer or whatever. I feel like, part of me kind of wants to hope that losing Bob Lutz has been a real big loss for GM. I think Bob Lutz was an automotive genius. He had his hits, he had his misses, but there is something to be said for someone like a Steve Jobs, someone who's a little totalitarian, has a design style that matches with a lot of people and can see their vision through. The problem is a lot of companies, especially big companies, is that they want to committee everything. I work for a company. There's a lot of stuff that goes through committee, and usually it's interesting because someone says, hey, that word is going to be offensive to someone, or that's not going to be relatable to someone. And so you start watering down stuff. A camel is a horse designing committee kind of a deal, and you really can't get like that Steve Jobs fingerprint on things, to say, hey, I want this and I don't want this. I want floppy drives out. I don't want a headphone jack or whatever. For better or worse, it is the manifestation of like a single person's vision, which is in a lot of ways is more punctuated, specific. And Cadillacs to me look like, well, we have that Chevy Cruze dashboard. Let's just leather line it. Or like, I don't know, the nose should be a little more round, give it a little more depth. And to me, it looks like the Lincolns to me seemed a little bit more like one person said, hey, this is what it's going to be. It's going to be high end. We're going to make it tight. We're going to put piano finishes in it, black piano finish, chrome. We're going to, put nice leathers. We're going to put 2,000 way adjustable seats or whatever it might be. And they just did it, right? They just did it. I think younger aspire for a sportier car, though, like a M3 or C63 NJ, and Lincoln doesn't have anything like that. That's a good point, Lee. I'm kind of curious what your age is, if you want to share that. It doesn't matter to me. I like what you're saying, and I agree with you, because I would love an M3. The one I would love is it the M2 right now? Is that the car? 25? All right, man. Yeah. So you are probably right on that leading edge. Right, you're out working, disposable cash, discretionary income, and car companies like these cars, right? The Aviator may not be the car that they want to attract you in, but they want to get you in a car. They want to get you into the brand. They want to give you a good experience. I think Audi and Mercedes are crushing that, absolutely crushing it. Right, only the best of the best drive M Roadsters, JC, only the best. So because they are making cars in the $30,000 range that pack a whole heck of a lot of punch and quality to me. I mean, the CLA is the first car that I said, wow, Mercedes is killing it. If you remember the original C-Class, like up to that point, the C-Class right before it was pretty nice, but it was a little little pedestrian. The AMG version was pretty nice. I like the little more square headlights. The version before that with the round headlights looked cheap. They had like an A class, which was like a hatchback that kind of looked cheap. The entry level Mercedes were not aspirational cars by any means. The CLA was the first Mercedes I said, regardless of price, that's a desirable car to me. Yeah, sedan, maybe not my first choice, but it's a desirable car at any price point. And if the price is right, it'll do well. And I think it's obviously doing very well. The Audi A3, I think, was a nice looking car, just as it is, right? And if the price is right, it'll do really, really well. I don't think, in that 30,000 ish or the low 30s, I think is a sweet spot, because that's kind of where all cars fall these days. If you can have a really nice car, you're just going to collect all of it. It's like game theory. You're just going to collect everyone, because so many people are putting out $30,000 cars that are not nice. And I think I told you, like, $45,000 for an ATS. Are you kidding me? And so, but if you can, chop off a couple doors, like the BMW M2 at, I think it's like $54,000 is amazing looking. It's amazing looking. And Porsche has obviously been very successful with going a little more downstream, a little more affordable and things like that. So, whatever it is that you can get your brand in. But I think basically I'm saying as a consumer, my appetite for kind of getting a near luxury car, getting a, the idea of, I drove a Chevy, so now I'm going to get a Buick, and one day I'm going to buy a Cadillac. That's dead. It's dead. The other thing, yeah, the A3 was nice. I had a friend who worked for Audi over in Auburn Hills. Yeah, Auburn Hills, like the Palace of Auburn Hills. We brought home a bunch of Audi price. Yeah, the Audis have been crushing it. When I was in college, it was really that generation when that A4 came out, a little A4, man. And it was, to me, it was like, it dawned on me, man, this car is nice. The materials are nice. The design is tight. It's not the super flashiest thing ever. It's a little small. It's a little tight, but the door panels are nice. And the funny thing is those A4s, which are under $30,000, started to become very, very plentiful. I'm kind of talking about what it was, 95, 96, 97, 98. Maybe it was 1998, somewhere in the late 90s. That A4, that generation of Audi A4, was like, man, good quality car, affordable price. And when I look at the option, like when I look at competing products, and I remember literally looking at like a Pontiac Grand Prix. Do you remember that car? For the same price. And I remember looking at an Oldsmobile Intrigue for more money. Like the Oldsmobile Intrigue, which maybe I'm having a brain hemorrhage here, but I remember looking at one and it was $38,000. Okay, list. But are you kidding me? It was nowhere close. Again, pre-bankruptcy GM. And so I say that saying that bankruptcy was absolutely justified. But it's just brutal. And, anyway, why don't we leave it there? Otherwise it's just going to start getting, ugly. I'm going to have to start using cuss words. But that's my point is Elio finally putting a fork in it. And then Cadillac, it's not too late for Cadillac. I mean, obviously they're a part of a GM. They've got a lot of inventory in house. They can make a great car. I've heard the Cadillac Super Cruise is great. It's not, they could just copy any of the great automakers right now, the Mercedes, the Lincolns, to be honest, all of that, and just kind of lift that and put that in their cars and make a very competitive car. They're just not. Oh, I guess the last thing I was going to say is the other thing that I saw at the auto show that it really dawned on me is the Infiniti. The Infinitis, for their price point, execute a really nice car. And I think it's the Infiniti Q60. I don't really understand the new nomenclature on the Infinitis, but it was the Infiniti Q50 Coupe, I think. Is that what it is? No, it looks like it's a sedan. It's like a Q50 or Q60 Coupe. It's the two-door. It's basically the new the replacement for like the G35, the G37 sedans. Do you guys know what that was? They don't have any up. Q60, I guess. The Q60. The Infiniti Q60. I got in that and I thought, wow, this is a great car. I'm sure it's like Mercedes SL, low end SL price or whatever. And I looked at the window sticker on it, not on the window, they have on little consoles there, and it was like a $38,000 car. I cannot stand the dual screens on the Infinitis. Um, yeah, I don't know. That didn't really register with me that much. But the Q60 for 38 grand, right? It was like 7 grand less than the ATS and way better. Just it felt more quality. It felt like a ground up car. Had better curves. It had more distinct character lines. It was more organic. It looked sporty. It looked like a road hugger. Yeah, it didn't. Where I think it lacked a little bit was in the back end. It didn't feel quite as wide. I would have liked to see a little bit more fender bulge over the rear quarters, to kind of give it, just a little bit more kind of a muscular exotic car look, some width to it. But otherwise, I think, that being said, I'm sure they're trying to keep the sides and sculpt it within the confines of like a certain amount of volume. But man, I thought this car was great. The rear lights looked a lot like Fisker Karmas, very thin as opposed to kind of those long lights that the previous generation of G cars had. But I thought it was great, and to think that you could get this for 30s was just amazing. When you could not get something like this from one of the American brands, new Volvos or standouts as well. Yeah, the new Volvo. I'll tell you what, that new Volvo Polestar. I don't even know what they call it, but it's kind of like the Volvo. What is it? The P1500, 1300 kind of throwback is amazing. I saw that car. When they released it as concept car, and I said they're going to build it because it looks just like a two-door S80 or S90 or whatever they call them now. And I was like, I'm going to buy that car. I'm going to save up. The car is going to come out in a couple of years. I'm going to save up. I'll probably wait a year or two for a couple to come out in the market used. I am buying that car. And here's what I thought, because it'll be a $60,000 car new, $50,000 car new. I'll get it for $32,000. I'm going to buy that car. It is so gorgeous to me. That kind of minimalist Swedish interior and Scandinavian interior, I should say, the Scandinavian kind of design, the minimalism. And I was like, I'm going to buy it. That Volvo Polestar is nowhere near where I thought it was going to be. I don't even know if they have a model on it. Do they call it like the Polestar 1? Yeah, the Polestar 1. And love that car. Absolutely would give your left nut for it. I just think it's great because it doesn't try too hard to be too, sporty and sleek, and it's a little more upright. And man, does that car have a lot of class to me. Does anyone else think so? The Polestar 1? But 155,000 euros. You got to be kidding me, man. I mean, you'd probably be better off buying the Volvo, whatever it is, S80 sedan, taking it to West Coast Customs and having them turn it into a two-door or the S90 or whatever, because you'll still come out ahead over buying that Polestar. That is brutal pricey. 155,000 euros. Let me just see what that comes out to. I mean, that's going to euros to dollars. It's going to be kind of brutal. 155,000. That's 190,000 US dollars. That's brutal. Absolutely brutal to pick on. Anyway, Peter von Panda out.